Alright, welcome back everybody. We're going to do a tomato review on this tomato right here, and this is called the Yellow Pimp. Now, this tomato was from a seed trade from many years ago, and I decided to regrow it one year, and here we go. We've been growing it for the last couple of years straight now, and it's pretty consistent. It's just a Yellow Pimpinellifolium. I do believe it's a wild variety of tomato, but I don't have any definitive proof from that. It was just from a seed trade, and it was called Yellow Pimp. So that's it right there. And so it is a pimpinellifolium. Let's a better look at it. Nice and yellow. When they're young, they're very translucent. So you can really see right through that tomato skin, just like an everglade tomato. That's one way you can tell a pimp, is that by that translucency. Okay, so whenever you see a tomato that's very translucent, it's more than likely a pimp. There's another one. Really trying to capture that translucency for you. Again, I don't know how good the camera picks that up. Alright, let's cut one of these in half. So we can pretty much tell you, or show you, what it looks like. It's really hard to handle these when you cut them because they're so small. Okay, that's what it looks like on the inside. Very beautiful. Now, there are other pimps that are out there that look similar to this. For example, we have over here, this is called the Broad Ripple, and they look similar, but they're not. You can see that the Yellow Pimp gets darker in color, whereas the Broad Ripple generally stays pretty yellow. It might deepen in yellow, but it's not quite like this. This one gets a little bit slightly on the orangish side, and this one here just stays pretty much yellow, and that would be the Broad Ripple. But there are a couple varieties out there very similar to the Broad Ripple. This one I specifically got seed for myself from a seed trade, so I know that it's from South America, and I don't know any more than that. I don't even remember the country that I got it from, or they were from, that gave it to me. So let's go over there and do a bricks. Let me back you out a little bit. Put my knife on the side. They're very seedy, these pimps. Holy smokes. It's about 10.5 on the bricks. Very high. This is extremely sugary. This is going to be an extremely sweet variety of tomato. Unusually high. It's even higher than my everglade tomato. So let's give that a taste test and see what it tastes like. Okay, so let's start off with the sweetness. Sweetness was really, really high. I'm going to put that probably around a 37, 38 on the sweetness, which is quite high. Very rarely do you ever see me rate a tomato that's between 38 and above. You almost never see that. Very, very rarely. And if usually when I do rate tomatoes that high in sugar, they're usually not too desirable because they're overly sweet. It doesn't taste right when tomatoes are that sugary sweet. It's an off taste feeling. It's like sweet and sour. It just doesn't work for me very well. But there are a few tomatoes that are extremely high in sugar. This one's pretty high though. I'm gonna tell you that right now. This one's got a good amount of sugar in it. Tanginess wasn't bad either. The tanginess was probably around, I put that probably around 37. So the tangy and the sweet was pretty good. The tangy was just a little bit more noticeable, and the sweet subsides relatively pretty quickly. But they were very well balanced. You had a nice little sweet, sweet effect, and then you got this real nice tanginess and a little bit of tardiness in there. They just kind of work together, but they mask that sweetness really quickly. Sweetness is very short-lived because it's a fructose type of sweetness and not like a table sugar type of sweetness. And the difference is fructose sweetnesses are very light. They come and they go and they're gone. They don't. It's like eating an apple. You eat an apple. It's even a real sweet apple. And you get a little bit of you get that that fructose in there, and then it's gone. And like after you swallow, it's like basically gone. You don't even taste the sweetness really anymore. It's kind of like that. Fructose sugars really don't last very long. So the tomato flavor was pretty prominent. I'm going to put that at about a 7.5. It was a very prominent type of a tomato flavor. It pretty much is from the moment you eat it all the way to the aftertaste. It was pretty much there. There was no, hollow spots in between. Like you didn't taste it for a minute because all you're tasting is the sweet and the tangy, but you don't know if it's a tomato flavor. No, you tasted this tomato all the way through. And keep in mind when we're talking about tomato flavor, we're talking about the level of flavor in the tomato. How strong was that flavor in the tomato? We're not talking about how much I like that tomato flavor. We're talking about the level of tomato flavor, the concentration of it. And so 7.5, that's pretty high for a tomato flavor. So this is already ranking pretty high. Moisture was obviously very moist. We're going to put that at a 7 because it's a little above where I like my moisture, which is between 6 and 6.5. This was about a 7, so it was a little bit more. But then again, you're dealing with pimp tomatoes, and pimp tomatoes, the whole inside is moisture. It's really, there is no really flesh. It's just seeds, skin, and just a tiny little bit of flesh, and that tiny little bit of flesh dissolves very quickly. So it's mostly water and seeds. So we're gonna put that at about a 7 because it is a wet type of tomato. Tardy sour, we're gonna put a 1 on that. There was a little bit of a tardiness there, kind of tingles the back of your jaw a little bit. Start to get that lemony type effect. So there was a little bit of something there, but it was very short-lived. It was just like a little bit going on and then gone. So it wasn't very strong and really kept me, tardy and tingling in the back of my jaw or anything like that. It wasn't very strong, but it was more of a soury type of a tardiness. It wasn't so much where it was tingling my jaw as much. It was kind of a little bit of a soury type flavor. But there was a little something there. So I'll put it at, I figure 1 would be pretty good. You could probably even drop that down to below 1 if you want. But somewhere in that range, there was a little something going on. Undertones, yeah, there is a little bit of an earthy undertone. Pimp tomatoes generally have an undertone to them. They have like a type of earthy tone, or a wild tomato type of earthy tone to it. I don't know any other way to describe it, but they do have a little something. And this particular tomato, like most other pimps, did have that type of earthy tone to it. So yes, it did have an undertone to it. I'd probably put about maybe a 1.5. You could even go 2 on the undertones. Yeah, there was a little bit of something going on there. It wasn't very high, but there was a little something going on. It's part of the flavor, to be honest with you. But the undertones I like to separate because sometimes above and beyond that flavor of the tomato, you get this undertone that kind of it works its way into your nasal cavity, and you almost could smell it and taste it type thing. I don't know any other way to describe it. I try to put it in terms of undertones. Texture, typical pimp tomato. It's a wet tomato. There's not really much texture in it at all. It's just pretty much water, seed, and skin and flavor, and that's really all it is. So as far as texture goes, I can't really rank this tomato very high on texture because there really is none. It's all seeds. So unfortunately, I have to give pimp tomatoes generally a really low number. Probably go about a 1 or a 2 on that, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to lower the rating of the tomato. That's just the way pimp tomatoes are. There really is no texture. It's just, again, it's the seed gel, the water inside, and the skin. There's almost no flesh on a pimp tomato. So you can't really judge the texture. So that's why I'm going a 2 or a 1 on the texture, because again, there's not much texture there. Production, it's a good producer. I would say for pimp tomatoes, it's a pretty good producer, but it's not the most productive variety of pimp that I grow. I mean, I grow like everglades and pink forbane tomatoes and spoon tomatoes and all these other varieties of tomatoes, and they're extremely prolific. This particular variety of tomato is not as prolific as those. So if I was to compare it to those type of tomatoes, I would probably rate this maybe slightly lower because it's not as productive as those tomatoes. So I would probably, under those circumstances, I would probably rate that at about a 4. if you were to rate it as a general tomato and just general production rating, I'd just go average with it because it's about the average rate for my average tomatoes. But if I was to compare that to other pimp tomatoes, yeah, I would probably rate that at a 4 because other pimp varieties put out literally thousands upon thousands of tomatoes, whereas this one will just, you'll get a good, if you grow a couple plants, you could probably fill up a half a 5-gallon bucket with them. Whereas my everglade tomatoes you can't even compare to the production of those things. I mean, I grow literally probably by the end of the year, I could probably fill up the pail maybe 5 to 10 times. Each one of those pails are weighing about 5 or 10 pounds. You're talking anywhere between 50, 60 pounds worth of tomatoes off of everglade tomatoes a year, and I don't even cultivate those. They just come up wild. This one you gotta kind of cultivate it a little bit, grow it like a regular tomato. So that's really all I can say about that. As far as production, 4 I think is a good number if you're comparing it to other pimp tomatoes. It's not quite as productive as the other ones. Skins are they're a little, they weren't tough, but I mean, again, you're dealing with pimp tomatoes. The whole inside of the tomato just pretty much dissipates as soon as you eat it, and you're left with nothing but a skin, and you got to chew that skin up. So what's that chewing up of that skin experience? How well does that chew up, or do you got to spit it out? Actually, you could chew this one up pretty good. It's already a small tomato. You could almost swallow the skin just the way it is. You don't have to chew it up. And, as soon as you break it in your mouth, that skin basically splits in half. So now you got 2 pieces. It's not a big deal. You could eat a handful of those. You're not even really going to notice it. So as far as pimp tomatoes go, skin-wise, I'd probably go average on that, 2.5. I'm not going to go low or high. I think it's about an average skin. They break up nice. You're not really left with little pieces in your mouth or anything like that. You weren't having to, chew it. It wasn't like having a piece of plastic, piece of plastic in your mouth that it's just impossible to manage. The only thing you could do with it is just expel it, and so it wasn't like that at all. So as far as seeds go, obviously it's gonna we're comparing against other pimp tomatoes. It's gonna be average for seeds for pimps. I mean, if you're comparing that to another tomato, oh yeah, it'd be off the chart. But we're comparing it to other pimp variety tomatoes, very typical variety. As far as seeds go, and I'm going to consider that average again against other pimpinellifolium tomatoes or currant tomatoes. It's about average. It's about the same amount of seeds as most any other currant tomato out there. So how do I rate this tomato from 1 being the highest and 10 being the lowest? If I'm going to rate it based on comparing it to other pimp tomatoes, I'm actually going to rate this one a little higher than I would. Like, if, for example, one of my higher rated tomatoes is Everglade, which would probably be an 8 or 9. The reason why that tomato is so high is because of the production level and the amount of usability of that tomato. I can literally squeeze a half a 5-gallon pail full of tomatoes and make sauce with it for a couple days. I mean, I've done that already, and it's really seedy. But all that liquid and all those seeds, you cook it down a little bit. You can make several meals with that sauce, and you leave the skins in there. You just grind them up in a blender, or you can fish them out if you want. But once you cook it up, it kind of all goes together. They're very small skins. You're not getting stuck in your mouth. So that's why I rate the Everglade tomato really so high, is because of the absolute amount of production you get off of that plant. This one I'm going to rate somewhere around 8, 8.5 as far as comparing it again against other currant tomatoes. And the reason why I'm rating it so high is because of the amount of sugar in this tomato. Now, I grow a lot of currant tomatoes, and out of all the currant tomatoes, not too many currant tomatoes really produce a highly sweet type of and sugary type of a pimp tomato or a pimpinellifolium. Not many of them get that sweet. In fact, I don't know if any that really get that sweet. This is the first tomato I have that actually makes a tomato that is very sugary type. I mean, the numbers on this were very, very high. They were in the cherry tomato range of sweetness. Now, normally cherry tomatoes, the sweetness can be really high on cherry tomatoes. It's just the way it is with cherries. This was like falling into the sweetness level of cherry tomatoes, so it was very high. It's a very unusual type of an effect with this tomato. So again, I think I'm going to rate that. No, what did I say on that? I'm sorry if what I mentioned before. I said 8. No, we're going from 1 being the highest. I'm probably going to rate that at about. I'm going to rate that at a 2 for a tomato. The sweetness was really brought that number up a lot. And the only thing that may have, like I said, the only thing that might have hurt it a little bit was the production is quite as productive as other Everglade tomatoes. It's just not quite as productive. All right, if it wasn't for that fact, I got an absolute ton of these things, and I could fill up a 5-gallon pail with them. Well, then that number probably would have went to a 1.2 or 1.5, maybe even a number one because of the production. But I didn't really get the production out of this variety. Maybe I just need to grow it a little bit more again for a few years, let it acclimate, and then maybe that production level will come up. I'm not sure. Plus, this year I grew that in direct dirt. I did not mix any organic material into my dirt. This is growing directly out of regular dirt in the ground. I do that sometimes just to test tomato varieties to see how well they do against, a natural environment this far north. So not all soil, where I live is going to be, perfect garden soil. It's going to be hard dirt, and I just want to see how these plants temper against some of the natural conditions up here. How would they grow on their own, so to speak? And this plant does pretty good for growing directly in dirt. But then again, my Everglade tomatoes also grow in dirt, and they grow insanely large. I mean, absolutely insane as far as how many tomatoes comes off of those plants. But yeah, this is a very interesting variety, guys. This is definitely something to be looked at a little bit more. It is definitely a much sweeter variety of tomato, currant tomato, than any of the other currant tomatoes I grow. Now, I do grow some of the other currant tomatoes like spoon tomato, Matt's Wild Cherry, I think, and Matt's Wild Currant Tomato or something. There's several Mexican wild variety tomatoes. Now, those tomatoes, they're currant tomatoes, but they taste more like a cherry tomato, and they have a nice, rich, regular type of tomato flavor. When we're talking about Pimp's type of, Everglade type pimped tomatoes, they got a different flavor profile than those type of tomatoes. And those type of tomatoes, the Pimps, they have a different kind of an earthy, very wild type of a flavor. This is pretty much what that kind of tastes like. So it's got that wildish type of flavor to it. But that sweetness is very extraordinary. I've never had a Pimp that was that sweet. That was ridiculously sweet. I don't remember them being that sweet last year. But in any case, really that's it, guys. That was your tomato review for the I think it's Yellow Pimp or Golden Pimp. The Yellow Pimp. I didn't write the name down, that's why I don't remember offhand. I just know it from growing it. That's it. That's your review. And what I'll do is I'll put whatever information I did have in the description below. You can read about it there. I will also include a link where you can go to the website and you can buy the seeds and give it a grow for yourself if that's something you might want to try for next year. All right, so that's it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.